Well, before anyone can begin recruiting, there are a few steps that you have to take to make sure you're ready to begin recruiting. First off, you want to make sure that your campaign or your organization has clear goals and a vision. If you don't have that, then you won't be effective in recruiting people to join on in your campaign. So first you have to establish those clear goals and a vision and what you stand for. And then you want to think of what kind of events are you going to be having? What kind of volunteers are you looking for? Are you looking for short-term volunteers, campaign-style volunteers who could be coming in for weeks or months? Or are you looking for long-term volunteers to come in on a regular basis? Once you've figured those things out, then I suggest that you write job descriptions, very similar to any normal job description, but for a volunteer. Make sure that the volunteers know what type of expectations you have for them and outline what they'll be doing with your campaign. Once you have all of those things in mind, then finally you can actually begin to recruit volunteers. Well, there are two strategies. There to recruiting volunteers. The first is targeted recruiting. You have to think of what is this campaign that you're working on? What are the issues? How long is the campaign going to take? And then think strategically about people that you think will be interested in joining in on your campaign and who has the skill sets of helping you with what you need help with. Targeted recruiting is you're thinking strategically. For instance, if you are working on an issue that affects students and you want to work with students, you want to rely heavily on on-campus recruiting, flyering, tabling, going to the dorms and speaking to people. And also, if you're working on something that is LGBT related, find local groups who work on those issues, partner up with them, ask if you can, speak at one of their meetings or put an ad in their newsletter. That's much more targeted. The second way to recruit volunteers is more broad-based. Although targeted is very effective, you don't want to shy away from using the broad method because you never know who you can pull in. If you have an organization with a very large email group, write a recruitment email, put ads in newspapers and newsletters. It is very important to debrief volunteers after you have any kind of event. It's very easy for volunteers to be given kind of menial tasks where they feel like they're not a part of the greater good. And it's always important to remind them that what they've done to help you is contributing to the greater good and how important it is. If you're having a phone banking, one thing I like to do is right away the next day I call or email or write a note to the volunteer. And I tell them this is how many phone calls we made and this is how many people said they would either vote yes on this or call their senator. And you show and make sure to remind them that they are making a difference and their time has been worthwhile. It's extremely important. Well, that's a very hard thing to do, keeping a volunteer motivated. Usually volunteers come in during campaigns when an issue is very trendy, or if it's for during the campaigns, midterm or general, they tend to come in for months at a time and then kind of drop off. You always want to keep them informed whether they're coming in or not. Write a newsletter, send an email. You always want to be in touch with them and just constantly reminding them that their time is important and that this issue that you're working on is important. It's very important to establish leaders within your campaign. I found with my experience that the more responsibility you give a volunteer, the more positive they will react and they will take that responsibility and run with it. Usually when volunteers come in, they're looking for a new experience, for maybe job experience or just because they're really passionate about the issue. And the volunteer manager cannot be afraid to give more responsibility to the volunteers. You tend to want to control it, and since they're not on staff, you're afraid that, what if they do something that, you can't control. I think it's, you want to recognize the skill sets and the abilities of the volunteers and make sure that you're giving them responsibilities and tasks that align with what they're interested in and what they're good at. If you continue to give a volunteer a job that they don't enjoy and you're continuing to give them more responsibility in that area, then they're not going to respond well. The key is open communication with the volunteers, making sure that they're enjoying what they do and that their time is worth it. Well, as I mentioned before, one of the main challenges that you're going to find is that volunteers, a large majority of volunteers will come in on a campaign basis, which means they could come in as little as 1 to 2 weeks or as long as 3 to 4 months or even a year. And the challenge is keeping them interested and making sure that they come back. You want to make sure that you're communicating with them, updating them on what is going on in your campaign or your organization, and come up with new ideas for getting them in. You don't always have to have them come in and make a phone call. Have an educational event, a panel discussion, have a social event, a party, a happy hour. One thing that I like to do is have a volunteer appreciation night, and I have senior staff members and the president of our organization come in and thank the volunteers for all of their work that they're doing and brief them on what we're working on in the future with our organization. I ask for constant feedback from the volunteers for ways to improve the program and what kind of events that they would like to work on. Definitely. I have events where I ask for the volunteers to come in and give me feedback on how they think the volunteer program is going, to give me positive feedback and constructive criticism. And the most important thing is that when they have criticisms or they have good feedback, that you show that you're making those changes. And volunteers really appreciate it when they show that their feedback is taken to heart. Well, it's very important to make volunteers feel welcome in your organization or campaign. The first thing you need to do is talk to staff people within the campaign or organization and make sure that they're ready to work with volunteers. Make sure that they're nice to the volunteers, that if the volunteers have questions, that their doors are open. That right there will help tremendously. The second thing I like to do is have volunteer orientations, one-on-one orientations with volunteers, where I sit down with them, I give them a history of our organization and the type of work they'll be working on. I make a briefing packet with information about my organization, and I ask them questions. I ask them what kind of issues they like to work on, what kind of campaigns, what kind of work they'd like to do, and that's a really great way to get to know a volunteer. Working with students can be a lot of fun. There are some challenges, but the rewards are very great. One good thing about students is that they have very flexible time and schedules. So when you're working with working professionals, they can usually only come in on nights and weekends. The students can usually come in during the week or whenever you need them, whenever they're not in class. Also, recruiting on campus is very easy. It's very easy to go to a campus and get your name out and push your issues. Usually, it's easy to recruit student volunteers because they're looking for that experience to help them get a job one day. So students are very eager to work with you and get more responsibility so you can be a good frame of reference for them one day. So take advantage of that.